It's 6 o'clock.
Hi everybody. If you can hear me, can somebody say hi in the chat box? Because I'm doing this kind of live first time. Right now I'm live on two
It's 6
channels.
o'clock.
Right now I'm live on two channels. One is YouTube, and other is Clubhouse. Uh, can we use chat box? One sec. Uh, Hi everybody. Those who are watching on the YouTube, may you please say hi in the chat box. There's a chat box because I'm doing first time, so so hi everybody. Thanks Sora for joining. I guess right now 4 people are watching. Uday joined. Hi Uday. Uday joined. Uh, Uday, can you raise a hand so that I can add you in a speaker mode on the Clubhouse? Hi Saurabh. Okay. I think yes, I clicked it. +1. Okay. Hi Uday. Welcome.
Thank you, Narendra, for arranging this session.
Yeah, very few people join because maybe everybody enjoying Sunday.
Yeah, I know, but it was well planned. I thought many people appreciated it. So I've asked a couple of my team members also to join actually this session.
Yeah. So YouTube link is also there. Like those who just want to listen and like ask via chat, and if anybody want to prefer via this Clubhouse
Yeah.
or chat, yeah.
Yeah, agree with you.
I think maybe let's give 2 more minutes.
So certainly. So I will also try to remind my guys to come into the clubhouse. Just hold.
Let me. Uday, can you try unmuting yourself? Because I'm just trying.
Yeah, I'm able to
Okay, okay.
mute myself.
I was just checking the settings because,
Yeah.
but I was able to click the mute, but there's no option for unmute.
Yeah, okay, let me check.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Hi Harsh. Harsh also joined on YouTube. Subhas Pillai also joined. I think at least now we are approximately like 10 people combining both.
Yeah, we can start.
So, where should we start? Like, I'll just quickly go with my little introduction. Like, will not take more. So basically, I did my masters from IIT Delhi, 2008 pass out, and from 2008 to 2000 like 2021, like almost like 12 to 13 years. Entirely, I worked mostly with the JavaScript. Yeah. So be it front end or back end or anywhere, like I primarily use JavaScript as my first language. So that's why like I've been more close to the front end engineering because I done it also like because initially in my initial career I was a front end developer and I deliver end to end products. So that is why like and that back to like 2008 or 10 era there was no React and all sort of frameworks. Like we used to code all the frameworks or the basic library, be it routing or be it visit library, all sort of things by our own hand, and like managing a lot of complexity which now those people get it out of like this from the libraries here. So I handle a couple of team many times and like handle large scale front end products. So especially this session, I'm just trying to answer uh, some questions initially, like so to understand and so that people should not make bad decisions when it's come to front end engineering, or to understand what exactly the beast call front end engineering. Yeah. So because I seen a lot of people like at the CTO level, also like in a past organization, who like make some kind of like mistake because they're not been through that journey. So that's why like because backend is completely different beast, because I work in both domains. So let's like start with this one. If anybody like Subhas, Saurabh, Has, Uday, Anhad Satsangiya. I'm sorry if I like if I pronounce anybody names incorrectly. So anybody want to ask any questions like specifically, be it hiring, be it any kind of like what kind of challenges startup folks face in when it's come to front end, all sort of things. Yeah.
Hi, Narendra. So this is Uday here.
Hi Uday.
Just to the team, I'm a part of a startup. Currently, part of a startup. We just launched the market, and well, we have a platform what we developed. My company's name is Capsimize, CAPXIMIZE. It stands for capacity maximization in the area of manufacturing. So it's we are I'll say we are an aggregator of manufacturing capacities in various sectors. Deep dived into on not all the sector but a few sectors specifically. So just to this is just my introduction, and then I have some of my team members, my colleagues actually in like Anand and Subhash. They're part of my team, so I urged them to join this meeting. It would be great to hear from Narendra. So I think Narendra, a couple of points what we look at from the engineering perspective is, so one is challenges. One is of course the design. Second is the scalability. Of the same design, and third is uh, performance. These are the couple of important points. I think we are looking at how to engineer this front end, along with the back end per se. So this was one of my thought processes, that we don't stop and recode too much at a later stage. So that was my thought process. So what all those points would we consider while we designing the front ends, the back ends, and for that matter the middleware also, so that the engineers would get some help from how would they engineer it per se. That was my thought process.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll start a few points, and like if you want to touch on the specific points, I'll go more deep dive in that one. Just to remind everybody, like we are on Clubhouse as well as on YouTube. And YouTube, there's a chat box there. You can ask questions if you under prefer typing, and Clubhouse you can use audio. So first thing, like you asked three questions like the design, scalability, and performance. So I'll go with the design part here. So lot of times startups make mistake because startup means it doesn't mean like you have to go fast to change some rules. So in normal production line, like we have like a system which is called assembly line where things can go one by one, and uh, you cannot go testing before you design develop it, kind of thing. So there are like few things we cannot change even if you want to go for the sprint and other things mean to uh, make thing in a faster manner so that small things can be done. So for the design part, like a lot of time startups make mistake because they want to do too much iterative one. So for example, we'll just think for this feature, but it is half cooked. We know this will happen, but we don't know exactly how it behave, or we're not figured out all the edge cases or those kind of things. So very important step is the design step, where I suggest startups to come first with the design with the Figma and all sort of things. Because a lot of time what happens, like the startup don't have designers and all sort of things. There's too much rewrite happens because you can say this is a nature of front end, because sometimes if you say this is completely a dashboard, something working, and you say like, okay, can you just move this part to here, and logically it may be a small kind of like a suggestions, but it can be bigger changes on the front end part, the code part. It's just like the car is ready with the 5 gears, and just by adding six on the like the gear handle will not make any kind of like a, it's a too much effort even though it's a design change is this one. So I see a lot of startups do not give too much focus on the design part, because that's what the like because that's where we startups can save money, because instead of having like a too much work going on the design development part, and just keep on suggesting changes, just do this much, we'll think later, just do this one and we'll keep things later. So better have like, even though like let's suppose you we can have like a something like a big and grand plan how what to deliver maybe for a 1 year, and we can design, we can just think for it, we can put more designers and we can implement slowly. But if you have a design ready, see, front end need three things basically: the designs, the data, and the decisions. These are the three things. Like design is what it look like, and the behavior, like the product decisions, what are the steps and kind of things, and basically, and the third thing is like data. So it's like a you have multiple ingredient to cook it, but if you don't have all the ingredient ready, it's like delivery thing. It's like not part of like a, you can have like something in a parallel kind of things. It's too much parallelization also not possible in the front end domain. So we need to, in order to have a kind of good designs and all sort of things, the design is very important. That should be done in a beforehand. And a lot of time, like startups should not invest too much time on the custom theme. So for example, let's suppose you choose a end design or material design or any kind of like a UI library, and initially you can just go for the speedy part. You don't need to touch anything, because all these kind of like libraries come with the theming, and you can just do the theming at the later end, maybe after 6 months when the product is ready, and then you can just do some kind of 1 or 2 month a complete design revamp kind of thing. So initially, like instead of like focusing too much on the changing the buttons, how it feels, you can go with the custom thing also. And there's when it comes to design, there's one important parameter also, like should not deviate too much from the what to say normal um, libraries. Like for example, there's UI date picker is there. Okay, now date picker is itself is a custom engineering. Like if you ask somebody to design a date picker, it maybe a team of like 5 developer can take month to design a perfect date picker working. It's a huge task. So just use any other material UI or any library or any kind of date picker. Just customize. So not too much deviation from the because if you have something which is not possible via custom libraries, then what will happen? Developer will go on start implementing this small widget by himself and invest too much time. So that's a clear direction should be given to the developers that you have to reuse what is there already on the open source domain, what is already present, and try to customize. Don't always take this, even this Figma design as 100%. This is for this we want to implement it, but if you find, because this is very important distinction, because if you don't say developer, they don't do it. So if you have to say you have to design like this, but if you have a delta difference which can improve your performance highly, then definitely you should go for, yeah. So that's where the designing Figma and all this can come, and definitely the design is needed. And before development, what I face problems like in the many startups, like sometimes they don't have designers, or sometimes they try to paralyze the front end development too much. So for example, okay, do this much, or let's this much is cooked, just follow this one. So like you can always imagine and design in Figma, like not the actual design, the code, the design you can do it in a what you say in a in Figma or any other tool for the 1 or 2 year. It can make a road plan, even though that's in the plan, yeah. So it's better to design early because it costs less, yeah. That's one thing, yeah. Second, before jumping second point, I got a comment talking about design. Is it better to stick with some frameworks? How about CSS in JS? Yeah. So for the design part, like so design has two things. But basically, what you see in the Figma, all this is basically how it look like, and you have to use CSS and JavaScript to code those widgets. Okay. Now it's highly recommended, instruct your developers never go for making your own custom libraries or sort of things, because already end design, material design, a lot of libraries are there which will give a kickstart, and you can do a customization over them over the time. If you want if you're what is it optimization and all sort of things, you can do it later. But like it's always good to write with the what to say UI libraries. CSS and JS is a different thing. This is like basically if you want to have customized your widgets, you want to use your own CSS, you can use CSS and JS also, because especially the CSS in JS system is very intuitive when it's come to React JS, because React is basically the more closer to the creating everything in JavaScript thing. So the React JS syntax is basically a JavaScript way of writing your DOM and all sort of things. So I find that CSS and JS, especially the style component, used heavily in React domain. They can be used any other also, yeah. So it mostly depend on how the developer choice, how they want to code their component. If they're more closer to JavaScripts, they will use CSS and JS. If you in past organization we used to hire, nowadays I don't see people hiring those things, but we used to hire CSS developers whose task was to write the CSS, and they were very familiar with the SAS and less tools, and just this their only task was to translate this HTML, no, sorry, the Figma designs or the Photoshop designs to the HTML CSS, and from there HTML CSS we used to pick up, the developer used to pick up and integrate the JS logic and the data integrate and all sort of make it from static to dynamic. So that is where it was coming, yeah. So there is no right and wrong when it comes to CSS and JS. It only depends how the engineering team is configured, what is their preferences, and what kind of libraries you are using for. That's one part. Let me just read few more comments. Also, how would you see the value of building a mockup using Bootstrap, static data before middleware, and the backend integration? When you say Bootstrap means what do you say, Bootstrap JS library, just like things, perfectly possible. Like that will be very helpful in the case when you are using your Bootstrap as your primary CSS library. So, for example, in CSS library, if you are using Bootstrap and not material design kind of things, and you are designing your mockups in the Bootstrap itself, those are like, I can say it like a static designs. Yeah, so perfectly possible. I think the cost will be slightly higher because means like the design, the Figma and all sort of tools give the flexibility of iterating very fastly. And in the Figma, the component system is there. Like what I mean by component system, but for example, you can design some kind of widget or some kind of as a component, and then you can reuse it multiple time. And if you change the style of that component, your entire Figma pages will change. So that is very helpful in terms of Figma. So there's like a clear benefit. The other design systems are possible, like we can design in Bootstrap, we can design using HTML, CSS possible. But what I suggest, like those are costly, and the experiments, these are like an experiment. Yeah. But real design happen in the Figma kind of tools, either Photoshop, Figma, or the similar one. Yeah, but that is where I would prefer. Like, so it's possible to use Bootstrap JS also to replace Figma designs, but I will suggest let's keep it separate. There's one extra point I will like to highlight in the Figma, because I used it that one, and I'm sure that will be possible in other tools also. In Figma, you can export the CSS. So, for example, the look and feel is there. Like I can just copy paste the font style, the whatever the things are there, I can just like copy the things and paste directly in my code base. So that is the benefit of the Figma. Other part is basically like uh, in Figma, if you design your like design symbols or components or like reusable modules, all are same thing. Basically, something which is repeatable, you need to code once and you need to design once also. So in the Figma, you need to design one also, and that is like pretty much like what do you say, like uh, 1:1 ratio kind of comparison kind of connection basically. So if you design 20 symbols, you can design 20 reusable component also. So it's better to use Figma. I will highly recommend Figma as a tool for designing your mockups, and then like go for like converting into like your components, be it HTML, Bootstrap, or Material UI, or React, or Angular, all sort of things. Yes. Forget to mention via React.js. Right point I was talking about the. Yeah, so for the CSS designer, like I still see like if you have like a team of like a 20 developers, it's possible to have like a designers who are have like they can write CSS code also, or you can have a CSS designer itself, like it's a kind of intern job kind of things, which will be very helpful. Because I'll tell you very like simple like economics kind of things. So why would somebody want to give like maybe a 20 lakhs package to somebody for writing CSS if like a 6 or 7 lakh LPA guy can handle that stuff? So isn't it like economic also, like to hire like because when you design something, there are multiple aspects of it. For example, like so that's one example. I just said these numbers are very like uh, these numbers are like this. You can hire like maybe 6 lakhs LPA package, or maybe 10 lakh LPA package CSS designer who will very focused on like the animation part, the very crucial aesthetic part, and all sort of things. when the you are like highly paid React.js guy can just focus on the data integration, data APIs and all sort of things. Isn't why like why you want like a kind of like a very high end paying guy to work on the icons or kind of like a border kind of things. So in my like when I hired in my when I developed those things few like maybe 5 6 years ago, I put a designated person for like a CSS designer who was mostly responsible for translating this like was a bridge between like the it was part of front end team, but it was like a mainly communicating with the design team, the product team, and the designers was the designer is always part of the product teams. And in the startups, like you have to have like a design things. If you're bootstrapping, if you're like a very small team like 5 to 6 developers, including founder, then it's better to like hire like a designer. And it should be like if you are like a producting, if you are like having something kind of idea, it's better to go for like a five or any kind of like a portal to hire designer and just go to and forth with designers and like just come up with a plan. Coding is not needed. What product should look like, how it look like, what are the differentiating factor. These are the very important point. Hi Nishant. Uh, I just got a hi from, so I just say hi. Uh, yeah. So that is like one part where you say what are the things to be considered with the design things. Uh, yeah, one more like when I was saying about the design part, the component system is very important, like the reusable part. So a lot of time like what happened, you design one page and you have design second page, and there are a lot of things are like what do you say, like common, like maybe like an input box, and at one page you are having input box with like a 24 px width, sorry, 24 px height, and in the other page you have like a 30 px height. Okay, so it will create a different look and feel, and it is very difficult to find those things. So it's always better to start with the reusable stuff and do it in a separate Figma pages, and you import those things as a reusable stuff. Yeah. um Okay, I got a question which I'll cover once I cover the initial questions. Nishant is asking how much important is the test-driven development. Okay, sure, I will cover this one. Yeah. Now it's come to the scalability part. Yeah. So there's like scalability is like in front end the scalability is little different because you don't need to like code especially to serve one user versus 1 lakh user or like 1 million users. The code remains same. Okay, and if you are hosting on a S3 and those kind of like things is basically the server. So the scalability is not important. Sorry, scalability is important, but the definition is different. In front end domain, the scalability is not for the user, because if you develop something in a front end for the like 10 users, it will be there for like 10 million users also, because it is the your asset, how your assets are delivered over the wires. It only depends on your S3 and your engineers, any kind of thing. So if you can host your front end over S3 is good. You can use CloudFront to serve HTTPS and other things also to get a benefit of CDN. Otherwise, like use Nginx and Docker setups. I said that in a case when you can't use S3 plus CDN, use the Docker Nginx setups. For example, if you're developing something with your front end, something for enterprise customers where they don't want any outer internet connections, internet traffic kind of things. So there you can use their private in company Docker setup and deploy it on an Nginx. Yeah. Otherwise, S3 plus CDN will give good scalable solution. Scalability for me in the front end is basically how you can like add more and more pages. That is the more important scalability aspect which always I try to figure out. So what happens, like if you make your pages and you implement your things, over the time the code will get coupled too much, so it's very difficult to add things. Or if you just modify little part, you don't like figure out where the things will be destroyed. So that is where for me the scalability things is how like easily you're able to add more and more code, more pages, more and more reusable stuff in the code base. So I'll come up with the two three things. If you can note down, YouTube videos is always there. You can just go ahead and watch the specific segment. So first thing, like, so front end is divided into multiple pages. If you have like, there's like a main application, there's a header, footers, and all sort of things. But at the same time, there's a one big router, and all the routers start the pages. From there, like our pages will start and do the transitions. Yeah. So first rule is basically no inter-page communication at all. If you like one page want to get a data from, just for any kind of data, go to server, ask server kind of thing. So that's one of the best thing. Yeah. First rule. Second rule is basically, let me just write down, like no communication between pages. Second is basically, if you want communication, for example, there's a one component, there's another component. If they don't, if they don't, they want to communicate with each other, the best thing, use the event bus. So there can be a global event bus where you can just fire some event and receive some event. Okay. So that way your like components will be like highly unplugged, and it's like I'm using this design from almost like a 10 years. Yeah. So like you fire event and you receive event. In fact, the Redux and all sort of like this kind of library use eventing system on the hood. There's no like don't pass function to tell that this is my function. Whenever you want to send data, call that function. That is not a good design. That is a bad design. Yeah. So if you just learn how to use event burst in a system, you'll get complete new dimension the scalability part, because that's the way to decouple things. Okay. Component 1 can be rewritten, and it can produce the same signals which the component 1 earlier version was putting it. So decoupling it. Yeah. Using your state in the different part will help you to do the scalable thing, but there's a specifically some downside also. So I'll just go with the one more proper solution is using GraphQL library. So almost everybody know GraphQL, but I'll just quickly tell you what exactly it will give the benefit for the front end thing. So in the front end in the uh, in the front end perspective, the definition of GraphQL is basically you have multiple what do you say components, a lot of pages. Okay, and let's suppose in the setting page, now you want to have one extra attribute or any kind of extra stuff. Okay, and now for doing this extra small extra change, you need to assign one extra developer on the backend side to uh, modify that setting API, and then the API is ready, and then front end developer will use it. Okay, and there's a lot of exchange happen on the APIs part also. In the previous design, the REST design, anytime when some front end wants some changes, okay, the developer has to design every time. Like if there's a duplicate data, they have to send over the two APIs. So the GraphQL get rid of all these kind of things. So you they can query the way they want. So it's not like something which what do you say that's pretty tight. So there's a GraphQL schema, and like I can query any kind of like data at any point of time at any place. So let's suppose in the header part you want to show number of live user, and it's just one extra argument in the query. So the scalability part, how you can use the scalability part. So two things. One is use GraphQL APIs, and the other thing is use bottom to top design, because I see in the 99% time the top to bottom approach is used. What I mean basically is you design application and the page, and the use developers start filling data and this write code, and this entire page is ready. Now in the bottom to top approach, this is what I want to design it. This is very small point. This is the small data, like just like a small header part, or maybe just a one small widget or a graph or something. Then design something, make it one component, another component, make 3-4 components, and then join it, and then join it and join it. So it's bottom to top approach. Okay, so in the bottom to top approach, like you're not designing for the entire application, you just design a very smallest part, as it like a, this is the application, and the smallest part query its own data. So let's suppose in the setting page you have 5 tabs. In the 5 tabs, each is a different components. Now this is like a 5 components. So component 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now in the bottom to top approach, you design a component 1 first. You don't worry about like this entire setting page, how it will look like, where it will be placed, what is the routing, nothing. You first design a component 1, and maybe you break it into smaller component, design them as a reusable component, and then create this component 1. Just load that component. Don't load the entire application, just load the component. For example, localhost 3000 / component loader / component 1, and that will load the component. Just play it, this component will fetch the data. So now you have end-to-end working component 1. It doesn't require a tab, it doesn't require a setting page, it doesn't require anything. Now in a similar fashion, design component 2, design component 3, design component 3. Now these are like individual reusable things, they don't communicate with each other. And if they have like a similar data, like component 1 and component 2 both are querying the similar data, it's okay. It's okay. When you load component 1, it will fetch its own data, and when you load component 2, it will fetch on its own data. Now you make another bigger component which will load all these 5 component in the tab component, and this is basically give the behavior of tabs and the title and all sort of things. Now the entire page maybe have some more extra settings kind of things, and then this entire thing is one page. So now we go with this thing, and in this approach, if you have duplicate data, there will be multiple query APIs. But in the GraphQL Apollo clients, what you can do basically is use a bigger query at the top level, at the page level. So all the component will use the cache data. So it's a very great design. So now you can just move your component around. You don't need to worry about duplicate data. You don't need to worry about multiple APIs also. So this is the way, like using GraphQL's bottom to top design. In fact, I have on my blog, I will put a link also. There's a blog which is called Atomic Business Component, ABC. So if you search Atomic Business Component, Nalen Sisodia, you'll get a link also. There I especially address this part of the thing, which is basically boost the scalability. For me, like the scalability is more in the front end, because like on the how you able to use the same code again and again. So in the front end part, I classify what do you say, like so there are 2 dimensions to classify the code. So one dimension to classify the code, whether this code belongs to the DOM or not DOM. So DOM is basically something which is UI. UI means like if you're writing something like a HTML code or CSS code or something which will be displayed, that basically is a DOM code. Something like a render function, all sort of things. Yeah. Any code which is not directly related to the what do you say, the display part. For example, if I add a Ajax function, or if I add 1 + 2, okay, that is not something which is a UI. UI is basically query. I'm doing some kind of like a DOM manipulation or render function. So if you develop, if you see your code, you can just classify into 2 things, whether it belongs to the like DOM things or is do not belongs to DOM. Okay, so I can just run this function without a window object also. Window object is basically like a kind of like a DOM object is basically like how you query. So display, non display. There's another dimension where you can classify your code. It's a business code or a non-business code. For example, business code is something which is related to this application. Like I'm writing this application, okay? And now I can just copy paste this code into another application. because this is very much tightly coupled to this one, because it use this variables and all sort of things. But let's suppose you write a Ajax library or like a det library or any kind of like a small component or any kind of things which I can directly copy and paste it here in a different code. It will work, and I can use also maybe like a utility library. So based on like whether it is a reusable across different application or it's a business specific to business. Okay, that's one dimension. And then another dimension basically, whether it's related to DOM like display like a UI buttons kind of things, or it is more like a non-DOM kind of thing. So I can have like a 2x2 matrix where I can just classify my code into 4 blocks. So if you can specifically 4 code, and if you always conscious about which block I'm writing, then you can make a more segment across it. Like because normally what we are coding, maybe we are writing one line of code which belongs to this block, but another line with this block. So that will make a very separation of the concern also. Especially talking to the component like the display component, I classify component into further three things. One is basically the reusable component. So reusable component is basically like a button or any kind of component which you can just plug out and put in a different application, like a Bootstrap. I might tell you, okay. We use this reusable component, our custom reusable component, to make a business component. So for example, let's suppose there's a user data. So you design a component called user data display, and you use Ajax to fetch the data, you display the things using this reusable component. But this is a component which is specific to our business. Right now our business logic is there. So now this is like a DOM component, but it's specific to business. So I call it like a business component. And this like a business component is composed of the reusable component. Okay. And business component can be composed of further few more business component. Now all this like your hierarchy kind of thing will go top, and it will end up in a page component. So page component is basically a top level component. Don't keep so many things on the top component. Let it like you use a lot of business component and compose and go top and make a page component. So your hierarchy is like page component and business component, the reusable component, and you have multiple page component which compose a application. So application, page, business component, and the reusable component. So while making code, one should be very clear on which code, which part I'm writing of, so that the mixing will not happen. So that's the answer of like a second question. The third thing is the performance part. So there are two things like in the performance part, like in the most of the front end, which is like a specifically load in a like as a like a single page applications kind of things. So most of the which I'm talking about is applicable on the single page application. So in the single page applications, like we load everything as a one bundle, or maybe split the chunk, but specifically like we construct all the what do you say, document or the page one by one on the client machine. We don't send HTML, we send the empty HTML thing. So if we start sending HTML, do some rendering on the server side, definitely it will do the improvement. At the same time, there are lots of tools like Wislow and like lots of like tools are there like Google Insight, where we can run our code, find the where the performance lag is there, how the things are loading, do the code splitting. Mostly like performance in the front end side, it mostly depends like because once your asset is loaded, so there's one more catch. Yeah, so if you use React, for example, like not React, basically the CRA. So CRA is a tool, create React app, which will scaffold your application, React application, the Bootstrap. So specifically in that setup, like that permanent caching is enabled by default. So, and we can do it by ourselves also, like if you're using CDN or any kind of things, we can just use some custom headers to do the what do you say, permanent caching kind of things. So essentially like you can use any tool to apply the permanent caching headers on your application. What is basically permanent header caching? And it will give the boost to the performance, because your asset will load for a large amount of time. For example, let's suppose I give all my assets like the HTML file, CSS file, not HTML, sorry, no HTML file. CSS, JavaScript, images, and all sort of files are there on the server. And I give permanent caching of, like, let's suppose max as cache headers max as, let's suppose 1 week or maybe 1 month or maybe let's say 1 year. Now what we'll do, when the client will load the page again, when you refresh the things, it will not ask for the new version, it will just reuse existing one. It is not something similar, it is completely different from 3 or 4, because in 3 or 4 server, you need to ask server whether should I use this cache or not. Server says 3 or 4, but still you're communicating to server. But in permanent caching header, if you specify max as, the client will not even ask to, like, whether this is new copy or old copy. So for cache busting, because let's suppose you do a new deployment, how the client will know? So that is why we don't cache HTML file, because in HTML file there's a reference for the JavaScript file and the cache burst parameter abc.js question mark some hash key, and this hash key is generated every time we build it. So if you use permanent caching, which come by default out of box, and but at the same time you need to set up your cache headers also accordingly, because I see a lot of people using React and systems. The permanent caching, the bundle is generating the cache bus parameter like question mark hash equal to something, but the cache headers is not set, so you are not utilizing. So once the cache header is set, your resources will load it only once when you deploy it, and after that it will be like loaded for infinite time. Yeah, and until you do next deployment, and it will load. So that will give a huge performance boost, because if your all the asset like JavaScript, CS, and everything is there on the client machine, only one thing is remaining, which is the data, which is the API. So you can work on the API part. You can use the GraphQL and other things to query the only data which is required and get the data. Then you can use server-side caching, other side of caching to utilize further boost those things. So once we have JavaScript, CSS, everything on client machine, you have data. Only thing is remaining the rendering, and which is already very fast. So that is, you don't need to worry about performance in the rendering part. If your application which is very like a game or some sort of things, then you can specific to the application, you can apply for like those performance boost kind of things. But this is the in general performance boost you can apply. I'll go through the another question. Yeah, so Udayji, this is the like small like answer to your questions where you asked about the design, scalability, performance, and other aspects for the front end. And how important is the test driven development? That is another question. So I don't give a much weightage to the test development in the startup, because the test driven development approach is more, it's like, for example, it's like cultural aspects. So for example, what works here may not work in some different thing also. What works in like maybe industrial engineering cannot work on the computer engineering also. So definitely test driven development, few other things are very important in the other engineering departments, but in front end especially it is not valuable, because and not even useful in my opinion, because front end is basically what you see. For example, if you're designing anything, you can see graphs, you can, there's like not too much benefit for the starter folks to focus on the test. Yeah, manual testing or some sort of testing where you can just do tests whether this kind of all permutation combination for this particular widgets and all sort of working or not. So developers should be focused mostly on how your components and everything should work or not. Testers should focus on the end-to-end integration is working or not, edge cases and all sort of things. So these kind of testing is definitely required. But the so-called test-driven development makes like no sense in terms of front-end engineering. Like that's my experience, and like I'm very much sure like that is the case, because you don't need to like, and definitely like, for example, you can think for like test cases before in hand. For example, this is the form. This is like normal thing. It's a part of development. Like it's not you have to label as a test driven development, because like let's suppose you have form, definitely like it should show errors while typing, or if you click it, you should not submit it. All these are things are there, which is part of like design things. You don't need to like write test cases especially for writing those things, or some sort of like frameworks which grab the DOM and just click the button and just test it whether it's working or not. I think it's a overkill for the startups things which are limited, which works on a limited budget. I'm sorry if like any folks like I disappointed anybody who like test driven development like, but specifically like yeah. In case it looks like we might consider GQL. Yeah, sort of. GraphQL is best thing for the front end because because in the front end and back end like there's always constant struggle goes on, like always two neighbor countries, always two neighbors fight each other, just like front and back end. So like they just need a delivery and just try to say parallel things and all sort of things. So GraphQL is a lot of this fighting because GraphQL schema is there. Just go and watch. You don't need to just use Postman or any kind of things to deliver those schema or like Swagger things. GraphQL schema is there. What they can retry, what they can mutate, everything is there, and what is the format and all sort of thing is there. So that's very best thing for the documentation part also. At the same time, like the approach which I like wrote about a lot of time about the atomic business component and bottom to top approach, and all the component querying its own data. There's not too much communication going on. You can just delete any component anytime. You can just without affecting. So this is like a this is the like if you want me like to say what is the test, what is the acid test for a good front end code, I say I should be able to go to any part of the application and should be able to delete that thing. For example, let's suppose there's a setting page which I gave example and there's a 5 tabs. Now I want that this fifth tab should be deleted in the code. What normal developer will go, he will go to the fifth tab, will put a display none. That will make a solution, but it should not be. It should be deleted because that's what the requirement is. And if you delete it without thinking much, just delete that folder or that component and just commit, it should work. That is how we can confidently say our code base is highly scalable because nobody interacting too much. Hi Manish, let me just go to your question. How can we have a cache busting on demand? I don't want to force busting for the user lose the data. I want cache to be busted only when user has not entered any data on the page. Maniji, I didn't understand much because because the cache busting I was talking about was the front end part on asset get busted. For example, the JavaScript files. I just read it in a very small again crisp manner. So normally what happens, like you have like a.html and a.javascript, a.js. User load the a.html where you can find the script element where it try to download a.js. Now while downloading the a.js, it will check whether I have downloaded it previously or not. Okay, and using e tag and expiry header, all sort of things. And if the server and server you can configure in two manner. Either you need to use e tags, expiry headers, all sort of thing, or you can use cache headers with the cache parameters with max key. So when max is specified, and once it receive it, next time it will not ask. It will not ask again. Okay, because the URL is basically a.js question mark 123. That is our cache busting parameter. Now after 5 days, after every day user is reloading the page. Every day user is connecting again to get a.html because a.html is not cached at all. Now after a.html get received, every day it is receiving a.js question mark 123. Now on the 5th day you did a deployment. Now a.html changed, a.js changed. So a.html is containing a.js question mark 567 because that's a new cache bus parameter. Now user load the page again. It will load the file a.html. It will see. It will ask again because it see now the URL is different because it was a.html, sorry, a.js question mark 123. Now it is 567. Whatever the different cache bus parameter. Now it will ask the parameter, it will ask the server to get the JavaScript file. For this mechanism where client don't need to ask your JavaScript again. So let's suppose our entire JavaScript is 5 MB. User do 20 refreshes or maybe 200 refreshes per day, and every time, like let's suppose Gmail, just refresh it, it just it will take only time which is required for getting a new data. That's it. For JavaScript, 5 MB JavaScript, it don't take any time because it is cached. So that is the mechanism where you need to have a cache bus parameter, and that for that things you need to have your build properly. Your build should generate cache bus parameter. Earlier in like before CR and all sort of toolings, like we used to use grunt and other sort of like libraries to read the file, create hash, and just append the things and load it there. Now it is automated. At the same time, you need to use your CDN and all sort of things should have a cache bus, cache parameters. Cache is equal to max as kind of things. Like this approach is called permanent caching. Yeah, the cache busting happen automatically when the new deployment happen. It is sudden. It should be deployed. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like when you deploy a new thing, so that's what I'm saying. That making so the design which I'm saying where it should happen suddenly. So the moment you deploy your new build, your a.js remains same, but the cache bus parameter get changed. Okay, so moment user do the page refresh, it will receive a new HTML file. So probably you maybe there are like few problems. Okay, one problem is basically you have used caching on the HTML file. So if you use caching on HTML file, then you have to wait till cache the expiry, and client will not receive the new after new deployment. So if you're facing, you're deployed it, but the user is not received the cache file, and if you have to do hard refreshing, Control Shift R, then there's some problem in that. There's some problem here. So you have to fix problem. If you fix problem, user just need to do control refresh, just simple refresh, and new data should come. So that's one problem. Caching HTML file. Never cache HTML file. I repeat, never cache HTML file. Okay, never set cache headers on HTML file. That's first thing. Second thing, basically, if you use proper cache headers. For example, if you deploy in Surge or any kind of services which do not support setting on the support cache headers, then you will not get that feature. Okay, so that's one thing. So what Manish ji is saying, like the cache bustings happens automatically when new deployment happens. It is sudden. It should be delayed. Okay, but I don't get this requirement. Like what exactly? Like why it to be delayed? Like I don't understand. Like why that cache busting should be delayed? So basically, like uh, like cache busting should be delayed, and actually that's the way it should be, because once you deploy to your server, the client should get it immediately. But like if you don't want your client to get a new build, I don't know, like what might be the configuration in that setting. Like I didn't get question properly then, even I, I tried to answer it. uh, So if you want user to delay things, so there's a quick solution. Is basically you use like some kind of database or some sort of like a server API where you set some flag, and user like have some sort of like WebSocket connection or some kind of like a API where basically like the client will poll to that particular API, and whenever it receive that signal, okay, then it load things, and you can use probably local storage, some sort of like mechanism to cache bust once it is needed. But it will become tricky. Yeah, it will become tricky. So I will not suggest to have some kind of intervention for the, like in the cache busting thing. So I hope like I answered few questions. Like So right now, uh, you mentioned Redux also use event bus. Do you mean by Redux avoid the need of using event bus? Hi Nishant. So basically, like you can you can create the Redux library using some basic event library also. Prior to even when the React was launched, I created my own Flux library and I used my own eventing library to create these things. Yeah. So even if you use Redux, I will highly suggest use a kind of event bus. Try implementing event bus when you want to, suppose for example on close of your some pop-up, you want your like a cart or any other component to notify that this is closed. Now I need to update myself to get a new data. See, if you're using GraphQL, you get automatic updates kind of thing. So any kind of configuration where you need some async communication kind of things. For example, let's suppose you have a drawer or any kind of things which will need to be open the second tab, sometime third tab. All sort of configuration is there. So for the communication part, I find like event bus based communication is way more simpler. It decouple a lot of things. Earlier, like entire front end was designed on the event bus kind of thing. A lot of in many companies, yeah. I like most developer, like 80% developer never used it. 80% developer never use event bus on their code base, and they try to find a different shortcuts, or maybe like a popular method, for example, just pass the function and to one component, and that component pass that function to another component, and he will just call it and he will receive data, and this is like a complete bad spaghetti architecture kind of things. Yeah. So event based architecture is very useful, must be used. And even I support if you can integrate your event bus, the client side event bus with server side event bus, some sort of like some event is happening, you can have a like live things also. Your data can be just directly transferred from server also, because it's just an event, anybody can publish it, another component or a kind of server side code which can also publish some event which can be listened by the front end event bus, and then component can this use it. So definitely, and I use Redux, but I do not suggest it to use the Redux. I suggest use GraphQL and base, just query the GraphQL kind of GraphQL data in the component. See, I'll highlight on this part also. So you have like a 20-30 components or 20 pages, let's suppose. Everybody is querying data. Now the what Redux methodologies and all sort of things, when we started, like we are facing problem because our state was inside the component. State was inside the component, and we have to do a lot of manage, like inter component communication. When this component get changes, this should update all those things. There's so much problem was happening. So that is the why people in the front end like us invented, suggested, just keep your state outside, and the Redux came and just to keep all data kind of things, and thus complete front end and back end. Even I did a few seminars on that one also, like how to use state inside the web workers. So in the web workers, there's no DOM access, so there's complete separation. But the problem happens when you solidify everything in a one end. Okay, it become too much couple. Your entire application become this one. You have to follow this one. There's a lot of scaffolding. Now it's a reverse approach. Your component is querying all the data, but you will not get the same problem which we are getting 5 years ago, because now the caching, like the inter-component communication, and when I update this thing, the Apollo, for example, if you're using Apollo, if your component updates some kind of parameters here, it will automatically receive it, because you can use GraphQL query subscriptions to receive the data. So you can 100% replace and have a much better design if you use atomic business component, smaller components, they fetch their own data, use GraphQL things, then it will be much better to use. So sorry, those folks like invested, like me also, use my own Flux libraries, a lot of time, build things. But now I'm using Apollo client library with GraphQL with atomic design to build smaller business component, smaller component. Let's suppose, like for example, delete button. It's just a one icon, okay, and it can do 20 things. And this is small icon can be like a 200 lines of code, which can do a lot of things. When you see, it will just look like an icon, but behind the scene, it's just like a 200 lines of code which do a lot of things, fetching data, display it or disable sometimes, all sort of things. And this entire one component can place it anywhere whenever it is needed. It can receive some data, and based on that it can just get it. For example, the delete button can get a user ID and you have multiple users, and based on that it can just do some color change, all sort of things, like multiple things. So now this small button is should be coded first. Okay, one small point I want to handle it, because I see this is a problem with most of the front end developers. They try to do top to bottom approach because they have one only loader, which is the application loader. They never created component loader. That's the big problem. How I define, like for example, now I talked about the one delete button. Now my challenge basically to one developer. Now in your application code base, I don't want to load entire application. I just want to load this one button. No header, no footer, no page, no setting, nothing, no user, no table, nothing. Just this button. Entire page is blank, just this button. Can you do it? For that, you need a component loader. Okay. So if your component loader is there, which can load any component, if you can load any component, you can work on any component. Because you don't have a component loader, you never create a component which is such a small. And because you never created such a small components, you can never go bottom to top approach and composable approach to create entire application and people to go it from down. So there are like very small points. Like if you start using it, you can make a great thing. Okay, so individual component loader is much important. Never design from top to bottom. Like that's like serious problem. Like people in many front end developer after using like a 10 years, 5 years, like they never like build things with event driven approach, loose coupling using events, component loader kind of approach where like top bottom to top approach. All this kind of like it's a huge boost. You'll be able to deliver something in a 1 month, which like other team is delivering in 2 months. Like it's a huge benefit. Like on the clubhouse, Viswas and Nishan, if you want to ask any question, like you can raise your hand. I can just add you in the podium. And if you're on YouTube, you can ask any questions. So I hope like I answered few questions. And this is where I just able to remember few things. There must be few areas I want to touch more. So any next question for me? Uday, are you satisfied with the initial questions, which entire like session was themed around that part, and that was a very excellent question. Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's some problem in the connection probably. Yeah. So Nishant, Manish, Saurabh, Mithun, Ronit, Harsh. Okay, Nishan is saying I'm done. Yeah, so these are like a few tips I try to gather over the time because of constant problems happen in the development. Yeah. So when we face some problems, we figure out some strategy and all sort of things. Yeah. So okay, so few more things I just want to highlight, the lint part. So I see a lot of developers don't use ESLint. It should be developer should be fined They should like say like we will cut your salary if you don't use ESLint. This is so much important for the front end developers, like front end development. Like you cannot produce good code if you're not using ESLint. Like use so many rules, how much rules you can query it. Like I see a lot of like code base sometimes that you don't have prettier. It's a base thing. Like prettier should be there, ESLint should be there. Your code should not pass to the review mode unless all the like so I try to use, I always use, not try to, I'll always use pre-commit hook with linting and pre-tier kind of thing. So when I'm committing it, okay, my code is always like there. What do you say, like the when I'm committing it, all these rules should be checked out, like checked. So this is done, this is done, yeah. So if I'm failing any rule, let's suppose there's a no undef rule is there, and if I define some variable and not define any variable and I'm using it in a function argument kind of things, and it will block me, like it will not able, I will not be able to commit it. So this is very much important, like ESLint, prettier, and all sort of things. Okay, so that's one thing, like as a quick summit. There's one more specific point I want to say for the tips and tricks. Like always use latest version whenever possible, and every 1 week or second week, or by default, like ask developer whenever you get salary, just upgrade the npm packages. Yeah, because what happened many times, like I some project is there which is just using this like node 6. Oh my god, it's so old, and developer never get a chance because we have to do so much development, we didn't get a chance to upgrade our node packages or node versions. So this is very important, like you have to use all the time latest packages. Yeah, formatting is very important, like what is it, like prettier, use prettier. So we should not be able to identify like this code is written by developer 1 because he used 2 space, and this code is written by developer 2 because he used 4 space, and this is the third developer, he used single quotes and not double quotes, and it use double quotes and not single quotes. Yeah, so that's basically like by the way, I use single quotes all the time and 2 spaces. um Another trick is basically like not trick, basically very common sense and obvious things. A lot of time like people like dump external code base, like some kind of external a.min.js file in our code base. Never put third party library code base in our repo. Always use npm to update that things. Event base, I touched it. Always use no global packages, for example, and use docker to try to build it, like use ci tools to like preview also, like you can just use search to get a preview your branch. So the per branch deployment you can do it using search, surg, is very helpful tool. Okay, don't use hash based routing, like if you use like localhost 3000 and like hash 123 hash setting, instead of this use slash settings. So that's basically look better in terms of like your urls. Yeah, pre-commit hooks I always covered, basically like it will be useful when you need to run few things, like for example prettier, formatting, linting. Okay, and you can even generate in one of the setups, I did a build also, for example, and did a diff. So for example, like in this commit, how much size change happened. So for example, this was like a 5 MB, but now it becomes 6 MB. So I can just check it using that pre-commit hook also. For the like use Gzip encoding when like for the performance part, the answering is basically the use Gzip encoding whenever possible, always, like always possible. Use Gzip, so that will be like your asset will be like compressed. Never cache HTML file which has covered it. Use cache busting parameters. When possible, use HTTP2 to serve your assets much faster. GT metrics has a page loading metrics where you can just judge your pages how fast they are loading. Um, do a complete separation between front end and client, and always try to use GraphQL APIs. That is basically one of the best patterns. Uh, Component viewer, basically use a component where you can just pass a file name and it will load your component. You can pass a component name and it will load your component. It will not anything. It will give you a playground where you can just build your component independent of your application, build more component, build more component, build business component, and build pages, and then add that page to your routing, and then it will be loaded here. So one more things, always use async await, because developers who are not use async await, it will be difficult for them to like adopt in day one, because but once they start using it, they will love it. Like, I loved it basically. Whenever like once async await was released, I started using it, yeah, because you don't need to use dot then and all sort of things, because since most many developers have used dot then syntax, dot then like promises, callback structure, so they are used to it. So a lot of time developers, even with 5 years 6 years experience, like they do start always using dot then syntax, the callback syntax. The code reliability will improve, and in fact that should be applied as a rule, uh, uh, to have async await, no callbacks at all. Uh, I think I have covered most of the things and the questions which were asked. Let me just go back to chat again, which, if any other questions, any specific tool you recommend? Ume, can you be more specific, like what exactly you're asking? Because tool for what? Any specific tool for you recommend? Sorry, I didn't get your questions. And I think we should have more and more this kind of like gathering in the IIT groups, because we are doing most of the times WhatsApp chatting. So this kind of interacting is very useful. Yeah, Ume, any specific tool you will recommend for what? Hi Ume, Uday, sorry, because I am reading your hand, your like whatever written on my screen, so I am reading your incorrectly. So hi Uday. So Uday, what is like your question? Like tool for what? Any external tool for design perspective? So I think I answered like a Figma to do the design things. Yeah. So for designing, I highly recommend use Figma. I wish like people can join on Clubhouse so I can hear more voices, because it's like a long monologue from my side. For design, paid tools. I think Figma is also paid, I think. But the free version is sufficient to make any kind of designs, yeah. So, but the collaboration will be limited, yeah. So, in order to do collaboration, you need to pay. That's what I remember. But I highly recommend
I
Figma.
was actually thrown out of the Clubhouse actually, probably due to low bandwidth, and then that's why I had to move to YouTube because I was like,
Oh, okay. I didn't throw because
yeah, that's why I mentioned my
I
name Uday there.
yeah.
So fine. So Narendra, what is we get a gamut of tools at the front end. You know, when you say Java, okay, it comes. There are sort of things which are inbuilt. Apart
Yeah.
from there are certain tools that are available externally. You know, which they help you expedite the entire process. per se. So have you come across similar tools in the past so that just from a perspective expanding the process goes fast? For example, you give an example of component based or not the application refreshing, but a component based refreshing, something like that. So there certain tools which help you to navigate through these processes, per se. Are there anything like that which are available?
For the design part,
Yes, very much. The focus is on design. Yeah.
design means like the UI mockups, those things,
Right,
na?
right. See, I'll tell you what the challenge is.
Yeah.
We very frequently go into A type, B type, or choices from the user perspective. We put in a lot of efforts on both of them. But how do we compress time, from a project execution perspective? So that's one of the, are there tools to help us navigate us through the processes? Is what my thought process was.
Um, See, I have mostly like used Figma. Like not me, basically the design team at my company is like, but Figma is like was sufficient for all purpose. And like if you use Figma's all like design build component, all sort of things, it will it will do all possible tasks which is needed for the front end design. Yeah. So for the design, in my opinion, Figma is sufficient. If you have specific things, for example, like uh, I never came across with because I never needed those kind of any more requirement than that one. But Figma was in my case was like mostly sufficient, and that's what I see in most of the companies. They use Figma, or like previously like 10 years ago they was using Photoshop, but now they almost everybody is using Figma for the designs part. Yeah, design part. Yeah.
Okay, and that's irrespective of what technology you adopt, right?
Yeah. So it's basically like it's like a Photoshop kind of thing. You can just do a photo of anybody, like irrespective, like whether he's like belongs to India or a US or any kind of things. Like it doesn't see the difference. Yeah. So the
Okay.
design part is very much important. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the processes, which we typically use for development is that while we develop the UI, we develop the wireframes first.
Yeah.
That will convert into a typical UI UX kind of a
Yeah.
text
So
file.
many companies use like low fidelity wireframes just to
Right.
say this is how it should look like, and then they tell developers to just try to build something around it and code it, and then we can do some changes. Then the process, the loss is basically you're asking something to iterate on the code domain, like somebody is coding and do some iteration versus somebody is doing design things, because like you can hire three designers or two designers like in the salary of like one good developers. Yeah. So that's what the market, that's what I saw, like unfortunately. Yeah. So it's better to do iteration on the design part, not in the code part. So developer is, you see, he's like front end department is basically the cooking department. He should get the mixing department. He should get all the ingredients, like what exactly need to be designed, how it should look like, what is the definition of the things. This is the data. Everything is built. Now build it. We cannot paralyze the everything like so do it on a. So I see, because the front end department sits on the delivery and lot of iteration goes on that part, and that is where like a lot of like spaghetti code and like not so thought about code because of too much changes goes. Because if we do give too much thought process and sufficient time, and I like to highlight one more constant point. Let's suppose in a year, if you want to do 52 sprint, okay, so there's one process which many companies follow, like try to do parallel development. What happened, like in the 52 weeks, like front end try to cope up with what's going on, because they are also developing. In another mode, front end, because it's sitting on the delivery end, it can be a, you can have a, like a 1 or 2 week delay, so that you can just develop a front end, so develop a back end, develop its design, make a product design, and then it go to development. What do you say? The front end department. Now, because it is having a 2 week delay, okay, all the sprint cycle in the front end is like little delayed, but it's okay, because in a year perspective, you only get a 2 week delay. It's not every week every month you're delaying 2 weeks. So that's where I like try to like find problem with many companies, because what they see is like, okay, we use 2 weeks sprint cycle. Oh, let's use, and everything has to deliver. And fundamentally, we cannot change the assembly line. In the assembly line, something has to assemble in a very systematic manner. Front end cannot work without product decision. Front end cannot work with the back end decision. Front end cannot work with the like all kind of different things. Okay, the host that has to be done. So it is always suggested to have a one sprint delay in the front end development, so that the back end designs, the product developments, product decisions, everything should be settled, and then they get it. So I find front end team 2x more efficient. So in the example, your front end team or sorry, anybody's front end team is like trying to do a parallel development and like constantly facing challenges, and try to deliver in the sprint, is far more less productive effective than a front end developer team which is having constant delay of 1 week or 2 week, and or in the overall year perspective it's just 2 week kind of thing. And that's not delay, that's a normal process. That's what I suggest. Like,
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much for that pointers.
yeah, thank you there.
Pleasure.
Yeah, Nishant is saying he is like using, like we will also use Figma and it is highly recommended. Yeah. So Figma is become a de facto standards kind of thing. Maybe like over the years, like Figma and all sort of tools, low code tools will come where you can design and you can just get your real component, all sort of like, sorry, components out of the hand. You can just code it there, just copy paste in the repo, or maybe just import it there. So lot of like these kind of things will come up over the times where like lot of your like code will be there in like some third party cloud application, which will help in the design part, help in the coding part also, in the design and coding part also. So I see like a lot of like these kind of low code tools will come over the time, and maybe after like 5 years definitely I'll say, if you're for designing or developing any kind of like a front end, you need a 5 developers, and maybe after 5 years you'll need only 3 developers kind of thing, because a lot of work is already done, and like many times you just need to drag and drop and just do things and click publish, and it will publish on your web applications. Right now it's like basically like everything is custom. Your entire front end team is creating everything from custom, just using some third party code like Bootstrap or Metal UI, those kind of things, and build some, everything. But a lot of things is can be automated, and I see like things will come up with these kind of things. Low code tools will come definitely. They will rule the entire front end engineering. Low code tools.
Any specific no code tools you have worked on recently? On
I'm trying to figure out my making my own low code tools. So I had
Wow.
not worked primarily in a low code tool, because kind of like a application and things I have worked on, like low code tools is not that much useful at all. But on the pattern which industry is moving, I clearly see like the, because for example developers try to create their own like even like so that's where the basically nature is basically like, for example, lots of free icons is there, like, but the designer is like create a new extra shiny icon just to like make like icon also. So there's a tendency to avoid low code tools and all things by developers, but I see industry trends where low code tools will definitely dominate and will be part of our development flow. So for example, Git is a part of our development flow. It is useful, we are using Git. Okay, similarly low code tools will be like will be useful like for my icons, for making some drag and drop changes, and or maybe some kind of like let's suppose product manager want to change spelling mistakes, or some translation team need to work on, like a lot of things. Not everything need to go through via the UI teams flow. So I see definitely improvements, and possibly like areas where this low code tools will definitely help a front end engineering team to, yeah. So nowadays, like if you see in the backend also, like a lot of like event mechanisms like Kafka and all sort of like third party system is like helping to make it better things. So similar things will happen in the front ending also. You not have to everything written in our own department. Everything developer need not to write every code. Like a lot of things can be like bought also. And if for a very specific application, if you find something is can be possible to buy and integrate as a visit also, that's possibility also. You should always do it, like, because if you don't tell developers, they will just start creating those things also. So it's better to buy. It's better to buy in a sense like this is subscription basis kind of things. Yeah.
Okay.
Saurav, do you have any specific questions or any comment, or anybody want to do a specific comment on till now? We have discussed, or any point which
Any thought processes? I don't know. There are latest technologies on the front end. Of course, we know. I think the most widely used is React nowadays. Okay. Do you think a selection of technology would impact the development? Of course, I understand it's a function of the kind of resources what you have. But apart from that, do you recommend some new front-end technologies that are coming up from which are probably better than what today's React or Angular are doing in the process? Do
so
you think about?
I think not in that perspective, because I have seen people coding very bad spaghetti code also using React and also thing. So more than the technology, like, because see 10 year ago I built like very similar application using the jQuery and all sort of thing also, because that time that was available, and even the code quality from 10 year ago and now is almost same, like not much difference, because I need to concept there, because fundamentally things don't change here. So developer discipline is more important than any technology. That is why I realize, because one can produce spaghetti code, and I've seen that also. People using Angular or React and all sort of things put lots of set timeouts, and they don't know what they're doing it. If you ask them, they just use display none to just hide something, and just they are afraid of always something will break. All sort of like no touching in the older code, or this is our legacy code kind of things, even though it is written in React 6 or 4 something, and now it is in a different. So what I see in front end, never think more in terms of like a latest tech, because 10 year back also, like Gmail was there, like it was Google Map was there, it was fantastically written application that time itself, like, although now it is better slightly, but it was there, it's fully functional, working just using JavaScript. Yeah. YouTube was there 10 year ago also. So developer discipline, like if you ask me, like I can create better code also even with jQuery. Just ask me, like, just I will use jQuery and just write much better code than the somebody writing in a React probably. Yeah. So developer discipline is more important than a technology, because yeah, in the developer discipline, for example, for example, if you have a 6 year experienced person, he's not using ESLint to lint the code quality, or not use basic things, that is useless. So that's where like developer disciplines come, how they want to emphasize more on the code quality than the tech part, because tech will always change. 10 year ago was jQuery, now we are React, and also 10 year ago a lot of things will be there, because some plugin will be in React, something different thing, and on the top level you are using something which can just use both of the plugins to work on the same time. Yeah. So don't focus more on the tech part, focus more on the developer discipline, which is more important, like for example, and the approach. Because if I see this, like the few tips which I gave, like if you go from bottom to top, use component loader, build your component one by one, integrate it in, use event based, use GraphQL APIs. If you follow all this kind of things, you means like that's my like normal habit. Like I'm just addressing everybody, not so. If we use like these tip and tricks and developer disciplines, the code will be much better than the tech part. Yeah, but normally like many people like I see like using React also. And nowadays I see people like they know React and they don't know what is the basic JavaScript. Like I know just React, and because that is what I worked on, and I don't know what is like the DOM API. So what is the DOM? How exactly it works? What is the basic JavaScript? So that is a kind of like a trend which I see, which is a very bad trend. Like people just don't know what is the basic JavaScript and just jump on the React and all sort of like framework things. Uh, so that is where like yeah.
Yeah, I think they are aligned to the market requirements rather than the core technology requirements in the process.
Yeah, that is where like because in like 5 6 years ago when I used to take interviews in the front end, like I only asked like whether specific to native JavaScript or like vanilla JavaScript questions, and make some event driven design or those kind of questions to know that people have worked or not. Like even people like with 5 years 6 year 10 year experience people, if you ask them like what is prototype, they will like clueless like what is underscore proto. Like okay, we don't know it, but they should know it, like because that's the best fundamental. Yeah. So yeah, developer discipline, and that's my point, because I see a lot of developer like 80% developers don't focus on developer discipline. Like they're not like they are focused on delivery part and just to make the things complete rather than my code should be best. And one more point, like I see very like company don't emphasis too much on the like refactoring kind of part of it also. So just like a sugar cane, you cannot extract, no matter what technology you can build, you cannot extract sugar cane juice in one shot. It has to be multiple shots for sugar cane. So similar to the thing also, no matter what you know something, this is to be designed, this is how to be designed, and you are worked in design is like the code part also. So you coded also, everything is working, but now after working you can just make one more pass to refactor the code, because once you worked 3 months or one feature and everything you delivered and everything is there, and now you get one more feature, two features delivered, but now you make a connection, a lot of reusability was not happened, now you can do it. So definitely refactoring should be part of the front end developer front end department. Refactoring help to give much better code quality, and just like sugarcane, you cannot extract the all juice in one shot. Code quality cannot be done just by one shot. We have to code refactor and ask developer to finish things and do code refactoring every time. That is very much important. And talking to code refactor, there's one tool called JSCPD, JavaScript copy paste detector. What will do basically, it will scan your code, in fact, and it will just highlight the point like the line number. So a.js line number 35 and b.js line number 135, and these 5 lines from this a.js and b.js were exactly same, because you know what happened, developers are lazy, like they saw some code is working, like, and they just copy this 5 line to this file and next time to that file, and this is like 5 line routine. And now the feature is worked and nobody is caring because everything is working. But now the JSCPD will say that these two files have this one common section. Now you can just copy this common section from a.js and b.js and make it one routine and make it one function and use that function in both places. That will improve the code. Believe me, 90% developer don't do it. That is where I give emphasis to the developer discipline, because if you don't have sufficient tools to improve things, then it will be difficult to improve it. So that is where like developer discipline comes. So JSCPD, JavaScript copy paste detector, is a very important tool. Every front end project should have it to see where exactly they can have improvement in the where exactly the common code is lying about, and where the chance they can just pick up and just make it one function. And this is like a very base thing also, very simple. It's very common sense. Problem is 90% developer, 80% developer don't do these things. Okay, so we have done like 1 hour 40 minutes. So still 20 minutes is remaining. I don't believe like we just like cross 1 and 30 minutes. People still watching it. People still tolerating me, my monologue. So
No, I think it's a great value add in the process, I believe.
yeah.
Not
On
not many of them have a chance to hear you.
thank you. There. So I uploaded this entire things like this is live also on the YouTube. So like because I know like people not able to join on Sunday also sometimes. So this will help, and I'll keep it on the our IIT channel. So and we'll try to like create more and more TED talks, tech talks like this, so people can come up with their own expertise areas. And next time maybe I can just give session on some different things, some different libraries kind of things. Yeah, sometimes on the backend also with Node.js and like other things with like how you can use JavaScript also on a DevOps, because I use JavaScript in the DevOps also.
I think that was a great session, I believe. Yeah. It's very helpful. Some pointers were very good. Like the
Yeah.
component loaders, it would make sense for somebody to quick turn around for a delivery perspective. No?
Yeah, thank you there. So any other question from YouTube side chat, because I don't see any activity over there. Yeah, so I just request one small thing, like if you enjoyed these conversations, definitely do share. My name is Naren Sisodia, and on whatever your WhatsApp channels are or LinkedIn channels, if you like this, and because what I'm said all these things is based on my experience from last 12 years kind of things, and those kind of things. So it will definitely add a boost. And I see many like people like many founders apply like millions of like dollars of some investor, and that because of some small silly mistakes they end up like creating a crap front end kind of things. The front end looks good, but it don't load kind of thing. So the code is spaghetti over the 3 years times. Now it's time to rewrite. So that should not happen kind of things. So those kind of things is very important. I hope I touch all points, so which you can specify on the like which will help in the decision of the those things also. So definitely on your WhatsApp channels or in the LinkedIn, uh, if you liked it, just share it, so it will like help. You can help in the spreading part. So should I end the session like on the chat, because right now
Yeah.
almost all questions which were asked I have answered it. If you anybody like live, like 7 to 8 people are still live, so I can answer any questions, or I can just wrap the session because we are already done with 1 hour 45 minutes.
Great. If there are no questions, let's move on.
Hmm.
I think we can schedule one at some other time of
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
some
I can
more
schedule one more
speakers to
time for
join in as
this.
well. You know.
Yeah, yeah. So I can just schedule one more time again, and
Yeah.
I hope this like this YouTube video will be definitely useful, and yeah,
I think that sounds good.
yeah, yeah.
That sounds
So
good.
thanks everybody. Thank you everybody who joined, and like yeah, thanks again. So I'm just
Thanks,
end.
Narendra. Thanks everybody for joining, and it was a great session, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you Uday. So
Have a
I
nice evening, everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll be ending this YouTube and the Clubhouse live. We will
Yeah.
do it once again.
Yeah. Great.